Polygon. Anywhere.
Would you like to sit in the center? Thank you.
Great to have you with us, Sandeep.
Thank you.
And finally, joining us, we have Jagdeep Sidhu, co-founder and CTO of Blockchain Foundry. Please give a round of applause. So welcome to the stage. It's really great to have you guys here with us today. So could you just give us a quick background about each of you in case anybody wants to know a little bit more and doesn't quite know who you are? So Bruce, will come to you first.
Bruce Pond. I've been working in blockchain since 2013, one of the very first blockchain startups in the world.
I'm Sandeep. I'm one of the co-founders at Polygon. And at Polygon, I take care of all things non-tech. But I also come from a technical background.
Jagdeep Sidhu, been in the blockchain space for 2013, just like the Ocean Protocol guys, and focus a lot on Web3.
So a wealth of knowledge and experience here. I'm excited to get into it. Bruce, we'll come to you first. Web3 is becoming a little bit of a buzzword in this industry. I think it would be great to understand exactly what Web3 is. So kick it off for us, please.
So I think Web3 is a general purpose technology. It's one of these rare technologies that comes once in a lifetime kind of thing, and when they come, it transforms all aspects of society, the politics, the economics, and it's something that if people embrace, there's a lot of opportunity to make money, to get new opportunities, to grow, and if they fight it, then they get relegated into kind of the technology back door.
Would you like to add anything? Can you give us more depth on Web3 and your perspective on it?
Sure, yeah. So Web3, I would say for me, Web3 is a generic term which is used to, kind of represent a fundamental shift from Web 2, which includes, people think Web3 is only about crypto, but Web3 also includes IoT, it also includes artificial intelligence in true sense. So, but I think fundamentally what Web3 in the crypto industry, what we understand is where you have these trustless systems which work without, you interacting with an institution or a company or a startup or anything. You interact with smart contracts which, in ideal sense are not controlled by any single party. So trustless applications. And as a user, your identity into these systems, you are the true owners of it. And the third thing which is, important with it is censorship resistance. Right, so these three things, in a general sense, when we talk about Web3, especially in the crypto context, is what constitute that.
Yeah, you talk about owning your own assets and that censorship resistance. So, Jagdeep, can you talk to us about what that experience actually looks like on a practical level?
Yeah, I mean, once the original concept of Web 3.0 was about value provenance, right? Using semantic web, data-driven economies. Now, when Ethereum came out with the concept of Web 3, they plugged in the RFC 4672, which is JSON spec for web. Now, the whole idea is to create, financial transactions and smart contract-driven data economies. So, like Sandeep was saying, IoT, AI, and smart cities are very important. So, what you're going to see, especially like here in Dubai, there's going to be a very big push towards smart cities. When you have Web3 interactivity, connectivity built in, and AI and smart cities start to co-migrate together, you're going to see a plethora of value being brought in. Your smartphones, your glasses, your wallets are all going to be digital, and so you're going to see life pretty much changing. You're going to be driving on the highway and pretty much charging your battery or charging your, paying Ethereum at the same time, all at once.
I think it's really helpful to understand why we need it, because it's exciting. You talk about smart cities, and that's great, but why do we need it? So, Bruce, can you shed some light on that for us?
So I think it's self-evident that the world goes from kind of centralized to decentralized, back and forth over 50-year kind of time frames. And we're exiting kind of a centralized era where governments, large internet platforms, companies have kind of own our data. They own our assets, and they can lock them, they can take them away from us. And Web3 gives power back to individual people, while allowing for kind of global scale coordination. So we have all the best of what a large government, companies, and internet platforms can give us that we're used to now, but at the same time, we actually have some piece of it.
Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I generally, end up giving a, story about the, brief history of mankind. Like, if you go back 300 years back, the king was the only institution in our lives, right? Like, whatever king said, what happened, right? So then we went into the nation states mode where governments became institution, wherever we interact with, like our police is an institution, our municipalities and institution, banks, and in today's life, all these social media, everything that you use today, because our life has also become more and more digital. Whatever you are interacting on your phone with any of the apps, you are actually interacting with a third party. And whatever account you feel is your account, let's say your Facebook account, Twitter account, that's not your account, that's something that is custodied for you by some application. Same case is with your bank account also. And you ask the question that why do we need this, right? So I feel that this is a natural progression or evolution of human society from previously empire kind of mode to nation states, and to now a sovereign individual kind of state, where you in future, let's say I'm not saying in next 10 years it's going to happen, but over the course of few decades, we would probably have more like these sovereign individual kind of situation, where those individuals are a part of multiple, you can say, countries or communities which do various different kinds of work. So for me, why you said why is it important? I feel that this is a natural progression of how humanity interacts and works with each other, how we collaborate as a society.
But given Web3 takes away the power from those centralized institutions, like you mentioned Facebook there, Jagdeep, I'll come to you next. What do you think the challenges are going to be in implementing this kind of technology worldwide, given just how much control, big tech likes to have?
Well, think about it. There's a scale problem there, right? Like, how are you going to onboard 7 billion people onto these systems? And so, we're focused a little bit on the layer 1 side and trying to get the scale out of the blockchain. When you want Web3 on the interconnectivity on the phone for every single person, and they're pressing buttons and stuff's got to happen on the blockchain, you've got to solve those problems on layer 1 and get the scale up. And so some of these things, they're being worked on, and we need that first, the infrastructure, the roads paved properly before we start to layer these specs on top. And that's when it starts to hit home for the average people, right? When they don't have to pay an exorbitant amount of fees and things happen in real time, and there's no security risk in doing such a thing. There's no custody in the middle or man in the middle that's controlling that system for you to create convenience.
I want to add to that, right? So I feel that this revolution also, kind of, if you go to the web2.com revolution, where the developers were coming up that okay, you have a shopping experience in the real world, you have a now shopping experience on the internet. Like you do dating in the real world, you do dating online, right? So that, I think, is more, the Web2 revolution was driven by more developers bringing or making these real world experiences into the digital world. This revolution, the Web3 revolution, I think will be more driven by users, right? But you're saying what kind of control has to be lost by these institutions and all that. Like what we are already experiencing with some of these applications is, like, for example, gaming, right? So gamers are already realizing that being a part of a game, I spend my, multiple hundreds or thousands of hours of my life into that, and I get some assets, and suddenly I say something and then I got banned from that, right? So that kind of ownership I want, with me. So I think this revolution is going to be more driven by the users, where users will be, like, the moment, as Jagdeep was saying, that right now is a scale issue, but imagine you had a Facebook or a Twitter where you owned your account, everything was owned by you, or you are a creator or an influencer, where your followers are owned by you, where you choose the platform. You can say that, okay, I'm moving out from YouTube and I'm going there. You take your followers there. Imagine if that kind of freedom was there, then you would 100% choose the Web3 platform. So that's why no matter what centralized foundations or, they will have a hard time in losing control, but users will eventually, kind of move to this, and they will drive this revolution.
that type of freedom does sound great. My only concern is how do we get the average person involved in Web3 and we actually have an experience like Twitter, because right now alternatives are actually struggling to compete with those Web2 platforms. So Bruce, do you have any thoughts on that?
One of the greatest kind of fears of government in Web3 is just that it's so speculative and stuff. But I think that's its strength. Web3 is all about putting value and putting a price on things that we couldn't value before. And if you look at that from an incentive perspective, that's how you get people involved. People are going to take agency and they're going to take control of their data, their identity, their digital assets when they're incentivized to, when it matters to them, when they can make money and speculate on things. And I think that that's probably the way that we're going to be able to do that. So if you can not only take control of your Facebook identity or your Twitter followers and such like that, but also monetize that, your YouTube followers, all this sort of stuff, and not have the risk of losing that, I think people will definitely decide that this is a better medium and a platform to engage with.
But don't you think it's going to take some time for the average person to feel comfortable using these new platforms? How do we onboard people? How do we make it accessible?
So I think with Web3, the key thing is that identity needs to be kind of rethought. In Web 2, it was like the user experience. How do I, the widgets and all this sort of stuff. In Web 3, it's identity. How do you use this kind of Ethereum address and tie that to the various services so that that's as seamless as possible? If we can solve that as a global community, then the adoption can start happening, because we already have the speculative aspect. There's lots of ways where people are going to take ownership of their gaming, their digital assets, their data, but we need this onboarding process that's not 30 steps.
Yeah, absolutely. We need a seamless onboarding experience to have mass adoption. Sandeep, we'll come to you. I think it's important to understand how Web3 is actually different to Web 2, because I think that jump sometimes people sort of miss.
Yes, and that also creates like right now, the issues that we see with the user experience is fundamentally that. In Web 2, your identity, let's say your Gmail single sign-on, right? It's owned by Google, so they can do whatever they want to do and give you some, buttons to click, and you can log in into, seamlessly onto some applications. But here in Web 3, you essentially want you to be owner of your private key, and then you sign from there, right? So that kind of, like, if you go to that extreme, idealist user experience, then it is going to have some sort of these Web3 UI UX challenges. But I recently met some teams. What they are doing is, like, I feel that we will not go from 0 to 1 in one go, right? It will take a lot of time for average individual to understand that. So we need these middle solutions, and there are so many teams and companies who are working on these Web 2 kind of experience wallets, right? Like browser wallets, like Portis and Venly, and there are so many teams like that, Taurus and all that. And apart from that, the teams are also working on, like, I recently met some teams who are now working with, let's say, Microsoft, where the keys can be stored in an encrypted way into Microsoft Active Directories. So that can be a transient way to get those experiences. But to answer your question, to be honest, we are not ready to get both in terms of scale and user experience. We are not ready to bring 100 million users or even monthly active users. Even now, with this multi-trillion-dollar industry, I think the net DAU, daily active users, and on all the applications, including Bitcoin, including Ethereum, including all the dApps, is hardly like 3 million, 4 million, right? And I think we are hardly ready to get that DAU to probably 10 million. In next 12 to 18 months, maybe by scale, we would reach a place where we can probably cater to 50 million daily active users. But to reach like 100 million to a billion users, we are at least 3-4 years away, and user experience is also probably like 12 to 18 months away from where we can have a little bit more seamless experiences.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. Jagdeep, do you have any thoughts and predictions in terms of when we can bring an entire new generation into Web3?
Yeah, so Google's removing the third-party cookies soon. So this is going to be a big problem. This means that you can't create a book on the individual anymore in the same way. And so also did a census in the EU, and they actually show that 60 or 70% of the individuals are now demanding that they either be compensated for their data or they are proven without a doubt that they control their information. There's no honeypots. It's like, you know, you pay me for the data, I don't have to give it to you for free, or I don't want you to have a book on me. So when Google implements this change, this means that everyone has to find a different way to create the books on people and have that implemented in their business processes. So like with Microsoft Active Directory, how do you create all those informations across the processes when you cannot access the cookies in the browsers to create a book on that individual? It creates a huge problem. So the way I see it evolving is using mathematical proofs like ZK to be able to create data markets to work on homomorphically encrypted messages on the data, right? You have someone's age and you want to sell that, you can sell it yourself. I don't have to give you the fact that I'm 40 years old, but I can tell you I'm over 18. And that is, in fact, something that's being worked on right now. So getting the Web 2 to Web 3 is something that's going to be required because of companies like Google removing these third-party cookies, and then having the ZK come on top, being efficient enough, we'll be able to interact with one another without actually exposing or creating honeypots of information.
So you and I care, you know, if a third party is monetizing our data, which we could monetize in Web3. But not a lot of other people, you know, outside of our industry, outside of the people here today, a lot of other people don't really care that Google has their data. So how do you wake them up and make them sort of, you know, become aware that they kind of need to shift into Web3?
Yeah, I mean, if you incentivize someone, then they're going to find a way to make it happen. They're going to say, oh, you know what, this is a way to make some money, or I can be paid to hold my data. But overall, it's just, it's the UX, obviously, in a Web3 context is a little bit different with private key management. But there's things being worked on, like I know some people here are working on AI, facial-based private key derivation. You can do facial and biometrics to get private keys. And the governments, when they come in and do their CDBCs, they're going to create a plethora of new opportunities for the developers to create the toolboxes so that they can create their private keys in a nice way. Because they understand the average Joe just can't enter the space. But it's going to be happening as soon as governments and, you know, all the companies here are working on that together.
Sandeep, do you have any thoughts on how we can make people care a little bit more about owning their own data?
You know, practically, I think the way it happens is always, you know, Bruce and Jack already said that you know, initially the initial adopters will come for some incentives, like very, very initial adopters generally come for ideological issues, which we already have. Now the next wave of users will come when they see some sort of incentives and all that. And then you reach a particular place where those technologies are at par with your Web 2 technologies. And then as a user, you know, you just need to brand. Like for example, this metaverse, right? Metaverse is the best meme for crypto. Although the metaverse, you know, if you see that VR world, it does not have directly anything to deal with crypto, right? Like it can be, you can have a simple VR world which does not have crypto. But somehow the metaverse meme has caught up for crypto, that everybody, when people think about, you know, metaverse, they think, okay, it's related to crypto in some form, right? So similarly, some meme or the other will arrive, which will say freedom or, you know, independence, or like, you know, user control data. Like people will start saying powered or secured by blockchain, right? And then, you know, when those technologies are at par, then that shift of these masses will start happening. But for now, like I think some of the other, you know, these identity platforms and user experience platform are going to incentivize. They are already incentivizing the way we saw in DeFi. The DeFi boom was more on the incentivization, you know, based on incentives, right? And same thing is going to happen with ID. Like as Jagdeep was saying, we are also doing, for example, at Polygon related to zero knowledge IDs, which we believe will complete the suite of these scaling solutions that we are building, right? And there also, I think there is going to be a wave of, you know, initial incentives. For example, Aave's Lens protocol. Aave is coming with Lens protocol, right? So that is also a social platform which initially will incentivize people to, you know, come and join. And then from there, like once it reaches a critical mass and the user experience is good, then you can bring in masses.
And then everyone FOMOs in.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, Bruce, so why is there so much hype around Web3 right now?
Because people can make a lot of money, number one. But number two, it attracts people who understand that centralized platforms are a risk. So number one, you can make money. Number two, there's an ideological aspect. Number three, it's just fun. Day by day, we get more and more use cases that can attract more and more people. I think this is one of the keys to adoption, and then it forces us to find ways to scale this protocol, which allows for more use cases and more different ways that people are going to apply apply value or put a price on the value that we've always had, but we were never able to until now. And so this stuff is going to go into everything, not just the metaverse and NFTs and stuff, but it's digital property, it's potential talent markets, it's energy markets, it's supply chains. There's so many things where this is going to start encompassing people. And if we look at a general purpose technology, going back to that idea, it takes about 30 years for a general purpose technology to be kind of accepted. Look at the internet. From 1990 until 2020, we can say that the internet has gone from kind of introduction to adoption. Now we can't imagine being without internet. We're 10 years in. With Satoshi, we're at, let's say, 2009. We're at 2022, 13 years. We got another 17 years to go. And so everybody in this room is at the forefront, you're at the edge, and fortune favors the bold. We're all here to make something for the world, whether you're here for greed, whether you're here because it's ideological, or because there's a lot of great use cases that meet your needs.
You make an interesting point, comparing it to the internet in the early days, in that there was a lot of backlash at the time, and there's a lot of famous clips from the 90s when people sort of, Bill Gates is trying to explain what the internet is, and it's just impossible, and everyone's laughing, saying it's not going to catch on. Web3 sort of feels that way. So do you think that we're in this rocky early stage? It is inevitable, but we are in this weird rocky period.
We're in the adolescent phase. We're the Web3 space is 13 years old. How awkward were all of you at 13? At 30, it's going to be, we're going to have so many trillion-dollar companies coming out of Web3 where people are going to look back 17 years from now and say, this was inevitable. How did we not see that? And once again, everybody in this room, you're all lucky to be on the ride ahead of most of the majority.
Actually, when you asked this question, I was also thinking, why is Web3 so hyped, right? And being an insider, I'm asking myself, why will it not be hyped, right? Because we understand the pulse of this, and it feels like totally the next evolution of this. So I would find a hard time summarizing why it is so hyped.
Well, I guess it's just the value of it, right?
It's so natural, yeah.
But if you had to say, okay, let's say the 3 key things that make Web3 so valuable and justify all of that hype, what would it be?
That's why I was saying it's hard for me to
I'm
think.
sorry.
I was thinking, why is external world, like people who don't know Web3? I mean, as definitely these markets, add a lot to that FOMO. So, and it is actually natural to any industry which became big, right? Whether we saw the gold rush or we saw the .com bubble and all that, like whenever there is something big and big people are talking about it, I think that is also one of the reasons that the people who understand people, Nailwals and Balajis of the world to, Chris Dixons of the world, when they are talking about it, the whole world listens to them, right? And plus you have these markets to show where, the values are, inflating like crazy. So people start, like the external world starts thinking that, okay, there is something about this, right? And then people start getting into the, the actual values, and the values, as I said, that, like anybody, like these big thought leaders globally, it's very easy to see when you get to the nerve of it, it's very easy to see that this is the natural progression. There is no way this is not going to happen. When somebody asked me why we should care about Web3, right? I went to a creators conference and I was like, I told them all this, like, jargons like ownership and all that. But last thing I said is that, guys, do not miss it.
Yeah.
Do not miss it, even though you don't understand right now. But this is like people who know, they know that this is very natural progression to how we human beings interact. And I request you all, do not miss it. Even if you don't agree with it, keep learning about it, keep reading about it. Don't discard it like out of your life. Otherwise, it will come as a surprise to you, to the people, like it came when they thought internet was nothing, right? And then today, everything is internet.
Like missing out on Amazon stock, basically.
Yes.
You don't want to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Jagdeep, what do you think? Do you think it's overhyped, or do you think the hype is justified?
I mean, I think the main thing driving it, Mina asked about 3 points, but the main thing driving it is the barrier of entry is zero. Like, you basically don't have to have a bank account, and you don't have to have credit status or accreditation. In the Western world, this is, it's guaranteed. Everyone has a bank account, but in the other sides, there's no bank account. So how do I get involved? With zero barrier of entry, it's very easy. And because Web 3.0, we're talking about Web 3, but the initial concept was Web 3.0. It's a semantic web concept. Now we added financial aspects. You can make money, like you're saying, and ideologically it makes sense as well. I want to be involved in something cool that disrupts corporate finance, right? This is a new way of doing business, right? So having zero barrier of entry has people doing GameFi and quitting their jobs and that were doing $5 an hour, and now they're making 50 or $100 an hour, and they're able to feed their family with rice every day and chicken, instead of wondering where the next meal is going to come from.
Bruce, tell us, what does a good Web3 experience look like?
A good Web3 experience, I guess, is just people understanding this, the ability to create, to use just who you are to interact with the world and know that it's secure, that you own what you're doing, you can monetize it, everything is kind of incremental as well as it compounds over time. This is one of the first general purpose technologies that the world is adopting all at once. Everything before this was in a specific location, like Silicon Valley or in Britain for the railroads and such like that. Blockchain, crypto, the Web3, it is happening all over the world now. And I don't actually know, I'll be honest, I don't know what the perfect Web3 experience is, but what I do know is that the world is adopting it all at once and we're going to solve it together. But that also means that the opportunity and innovation is going to be spread globally and not just in one place. And that, for me, gives a lot of hope. The fact that I think somewhere like 20% of some countries in Africa, in Southeast Asia, even in America, 20% of the population have crypto. For me, that's the best, that's the best leading indicator that the Web3 experience already fulfills a lot of the things that we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Bringing people onto that, I don't want to say financial map because it's so much more than just finance, isn't it? But absolutely. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking more from the practical, like how applications should look like. So, I was thinking that for application, at application level, you have two kinds of users. One who understand a bit of like Web3, and they want like full details. Like they want to know that, okay, what am I signing on, and like whether it's being popping up and asking a signature from me or not. And then on the other side, the people who don't know Web3 that much and they don't want to be exposed to the, exposed to this complexity, while also knowing that they are secure, they're not losing out money, as Bruce was saying. So I think for me, the best, I'm directly talking about the, on a tactical level, not like strategic level where Bruce was saying. So on a tactical level, for an application, I feel the best way is that you give a very simplistic Web2 kind of experience where you can click log in with your email ID, but you also give advanced settings where, somebody like me will go to advanced settings and say that, okay, I need full disclosure on what is happening over there. I think that way we can reach the middle. Otherwise, like even ideologically, if you build an app where you are just, user is clicking a button and you are supplying the signature in the background, people will be on crypto Twitter, no, this is not Web3, this is scam and all that, right? So you need to be somewhere in the middle, and that's what I feel the apps can achieve, that middle ground.
Yeah, and Jagdeep?
Yeah, I think the reason Bruce said we don't know what it looks like is true. We don't know what it looks like because we haven't solved the digital identity layer, right? How are IoT devices and people supposed to interconnect and create a standard? So, we are working on the W3 spec, the DID spec, that allows us to assign what a digital identity should look like, and then how does it interact? Where are the zero knowledge components plugging in? How are the data markets looking like? This is the sort of thing that we need a standard for. So there's RFCs and there's W3C specs out there that we're working on today. And like as Bruce was saying, it's a little bit early. We got 17 more years, but I would say the next 3 to 4 years, as the blockchain layer 1s start to scale up, you're going to have the ability to start plugging in new use cases that weren't possible using the DID specs. Right now, they were using, permission blockchains or ENS systems, but they don't scale enough. and they don't have the ZK stuff ready on the prover and verifier side that are efficient enough to start plugging in the average person. So having that standardization, we're still working on that, but I would say in the next 2-3 years, it's going to be ready, and then it's going to be just game on after that.
So you have just answered almost my final question, but we have about a minute left, so I just want to keep it quite brief for us. Just answer the question of the panel. How far away are we from a true Web3 experience? Bruce, we'll come to you first.
I think we're a couple of years away, 2 or 3 years.
Okay. Sandeep?
I agree with the same, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, 2-3 years, yeah.
2-3 years from a true Web3 experience. How exciting. Bruce, Sandeep, Jagdeep, I want to thank you all so much for joining us on the panel today. It's been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, come on. Go this way. Oh, no. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Web3. And I'm sure I speak on the behalf of everybody here when I say we all look forward to a true Web3 future. Leah, what